The champagne hadn't even been poured yet when the air shifted. A brittle silence cracked through the brunch hall, the kind that only happens when someone's about to do something that changes the entire temperature of the room. I was still holding a velvet gift bag, fingers barely wrapped around the ribbon, when my half-sister, Brielle, stood up from her chair. Her face was flushed, not from wine but from pure venom, and her voice sliced through the background chatter like a blade. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. She's not even our family, she screamed, pointing straight at me. My fingers stilled mid-ribbon pull. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Someone's mimosa glass clinked softly back onto a saucer. And then, a cake. A full, multi-layered vanilla buttercream cake.
Thrown at me.
I didn't move. Not an inch. It hit my chest and slid down the front of my blouse in slow, humiliating motion, dripping sweet shame into my lap. Laughter burst from the guests like confetti, dozens of them, most of them old family friends or my stepmom's high society brunch circle, giggling behind napkins and barely concealed phone cameras. My stepmother, Denise, gasped, but not in horror.
No.
She gasped the way someone does when their party gets even more entertaining. And my father? He just adjusted his tie and looked away. For one heartbeat, I felt 12 years old again, watching them cut me out with clean, deliberate lines like a photo cropped for perfection. But then I saw him.
Nate.
My husband. Standing quietly beside the stage, holding a microphone.
Calm. Composed.
Still wearing the navy blue suit I'd pressed for him last night, and the wedding band that never left his finger.
He didn't yell.
He didn't rush to wipe cake off me. He just said, quietly into the mic. Then I guess you should know who paid for this party. The room froze. Every fork. Every breath. Every mocking smile. Because I sure as hell didn't write a six-figure check to have my wife assaulted with dessert, he added, his voice rising, not with rage, but with authority that no one could ignore. Gasps rippled through the room. Denise's wine glass trembled in her hand. Brielle went pale. And then Nate turned to me. Just me.
His voice softened.
Come here, baby. I stood up, the remains of frosting still clinging to my blouse like insults I refused to wipe away. I walked over. And when I reached him, he kissed my cheek, the cheek that hadn't been hit, and turned back to the guests. You all love brunches, right? He said, with a mock smile that dripped with chill. So here's the real menu today. Truth, inheritance, and how loyalty actually works. Buckle up. And in that moment, I knew something they didn't. This wasn't just Nate defending me. It was the start of everything they had buried for years, rising from beneath the polished marble floor, truths, betrayal, money, blood. And I wasn't just a target anymore. I was about to become the storm. Nate didn't need to shout to take command of the entire room. His presence did it for him. The mic in his hand might as well have been a gavel. And the brunch that had started with floral arrangements, curated playlists, and Bellinis now felt more like a courtroom about to hear a long-overdue verdict. I watched Brielle, the same girl who once locked me in the attic at age 9 and called it a game, blink in confusion. Her hand, the one that had thrown the cake, was now trembling near her mimosa glass. Maybe it was finally dawning on her that Nate wasn't just my husband, but a man who did not bluff. I paid for this event because Denise wanted something extravagant, Nate said, keeping his gaze level. And I figured, hey, why not? My wife deserves to be included in her own family celebrations, right? Denise's lip twitched. She is family, he added, turning toward Brielle now. Legally, financially, and frankly, with more grace than any of you have shown today. Someone at the back of the room cleared their throat. Someone else slowly set down a phone they'd been recording with. And still, Nate wasn't done. You want to throw cake and call names? That's fine. But before anyone else humiliates the woman I married, let's run down a few facts. His eyes swept the room like a storm warning. First, he began, The down payment for this estate where Denise and my father-in-law live rent-free came from my business. The renovation funds last year that mysteriously appeared? That was us. The health insurance Denise used when she had her little private surgery? Paid for under my company's coverage because she couldn't qualify herself. Denise's smile cracked. And the car Brielle crashed last fall after drinking half a bottle of rose? Nate asked, smiling coldly now. We handled that too. Quietly. To avoid a DUI on your precious record. The air turned solid. You could have heard someone breathe wrong. I looked around the room and saw faces change.
Fast.
The fake smiles dimmed, the performative laughter gone. It was all unraveling, and it was delicious. And you, Nate said, turning to Brielle. You called my wife an outsider. A maid. Someone not real family. So, let's talk about real. His voice lowered, a razor-sharp whisper. Who picked up your college debt when you couldn't get another loan? Who signed the paperwork to co-sign your lease in Manhattan? Who covered your canceled honeymoon flight after your now ex-husband walked out? Brielle's lips parted. Yeah, Nate said. Us. Then he turned to me and gently placed the mic in my hand. My pulse thudded. I didn't expect this moment. I never asked for it, but I wasn't going to waste it. So I looked out across the stunned room, frosting still streaked across my shirt, and smiled. I grew up thinking that if I worked hard enough, I'd earn my place in this family, I said quietly. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet, brought gifts, remembered birthdays, eventually I'd stop being the stepdaughter. I looked at Denise. At age 15, I was the only one cooking dinners when Dad was working nights. I braided Brielle's hair before school. I did chores. I cleaned. I smiled when people said I was lucky to have a roof over my head. I turned to Brielle. You always hated me, and I never really knew why. But now I understand. It's because I never needed to be like you. I had character. You just had parties. Nate's hand brushed my shoulder as if to say, go on. Take it all the way.
So I did.
This isn't about cake, I said. This is about what happens when you spend your whole life pretending you're the main character, only to find out the spotlight's never been on you. The silence was complete. Then I added, we'll be leaving now. And, by the way, the catering's already been paid in full. But if you want a refund, you can send the request to my lawyer. I handed the mic back to Nate, who bowed slightly, like we were at a theater performance, not a war zone. And then, with frosting still sliding down my side, we walked hand in hand out of the room. Behind us, the birthday brunch fell into chaos. And we didn't look back once. The ride home was silent, but it wasn't empty. I sat beside Nate in the back seat of the black SUV, staring at the reflection of my smeared blouse in the window, still feeling the faint sting of buttercream near my collarbone. I didn't cry. I didn't fume. I didn't even speak. I was listening to everything I didn't say at that brunch. Every suppressed emotion. Every overlooked moment. Every time I laughed off an insult to keep the peace. That peace had shattered. You okay? Nate asked, eyes never leaving the road ahead. I nodded, then shook my head. I don't know. You were brilliant, he said. I turned to him. I wasn't brave. I was done. Nate didn't argue. He knew the difference. When we pulled into our driveway, the house looked just as we left it, clean, warm, quiet. But something in me felt different. This time, I walked in not like a visitor to someone else's life, but like a woman who was about to reclaim her own. That night, after I showered off the dried frosting and humiliation, I sat at the kitchen island with a glass of red wine and opened the brown folder I kept tucked away in my desk drawer. The one labeled just in case. Inside were old receipts, copies of wire transfers, a file of Denise's prescription bills Nate had covered, a breakdown of every time my father had withdrawn from my trust account, starting the year after my mother passed away. All those years, I'd thought it was love, family, a home. But all along, I'd been funding my own rejection. I ran my finger along the highlighted transaction dates. One in particular stopped me cold. 6 years ago, $12,000 wired from my inheritance into Brielle's bank account. 2 weeks before her surprise engagement in Cabo. I never even got a thank you card. Nate came over, wrapping an arm around me, scanning the paperwork. You ready to burn it all down? I'm ready to build something better, I whispered. But they're not going to like the cost. He kissed the top of my head. Let them learn. You paid their bills. It's time they pay the consequences. The next morning, the storm truly began. It started with a phone call from Denise. Or rather, her assistant. Hi, Mrs. Kavanaugh. Denise wanted me to ask if you might speak to the media. There's a video circulating. From yesterday. I won't speak to anyone, I said calmly. But if Denise wants me to say nothing, she might want to rethink who she keeps close. That video didn't leak by accident. The line went dead. 2 hours later, Brielle called. I didn't answer. She sent 8 messages, none of which I opened. By the afternoon, tabloids were posting clips of her yelling, followed by the moment the cake hit me and Nate's mic drop speech. Headlines read, "Brunch birthday turns brutal as family secrets explode." It was funny how the world suddenly cared about my pain only after it became entertainment. Later that week, Nate invited me to sit in on a business lunch with a new investor. He said he wanted me to be there not as a guest, not as a wife, but as a partner. The investor, a sharp-eyed woman named Alicia, leaned across the table and said, "You're the one who streamlined your husband's financial department last year, right? The one who caught the error in the vendor contracts." I nodded, surprised she knew. "I've read your notes. They're genius." And for the first time in years, someone in a room of power saw me not as less, but as enough. On the way back to the office, Nate said, "You know, I've been thinking, why not start something of your own? Not for revenge. For you." I stared out the window. "Like a company? Like an empire," he said, grinning. And suddenly something shifted. For the first time in my life, I didn't want to fit into someone else's legacy. I wanted to build my own. They didn't stay quiet for long. By the end of the week, Denise posted a soft-lit apology video from her garden. She wore pearls, a pastel cardigan. The whole thing was curated down to the accidental appearance of a golden retriever in the background. "We all have our moments," she said with a theatrical sigh, "and family isn't perfect. But love always finds a way back." It was meant for damage control. But the comments didn't go how she expected. "Isn't this the woman who let her stepdaughter get caked in front of guests? Girl, say sorry to her, not to your followers." Not Denise trying to rehab her image like she didn't laugh. The tide had turned. And she knew it. Meanwhile, Brielle went radio silent until one night my phone rang. Blocked number. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. "Are you happy now?" Brielle's voice slithered through the speaker. "Define happy," I said flatly. "You made me a joke online. You're not family. You never were. You're just some sad little charity case dad dragged in and married off to a guy with too much money and a savior complex." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. "I was 12 when you told me I'd never be good enough to be loved," I said quietly. "You were 17, and I believed you." Silence. But I stopped believing you the moment Nate stepped in front of that mic.
Click.
She hung up, and just like that, it was done. But the story wasn't over. It was shifting. Because the empire Nate had talked about, I was building it. Quietly. Precisely. I launched my own firm, specialized consulting for executive women dealing with toxic family business dynamics. The irony wasn't lost on me. But the inbox was full within days. Because I wasn't the only one. Turns out a lot of women had been the outsider. A lot of women had been laughed at, silenced, mocked in family dinners and boardrooms alike. And they were ready to pay someone who understood, who wouldn't just sympathize but strategize. Nate stood by me through every meeting, every pitch deck, every time I questioned if I was moving too fast. He never once told me to slow down. In fact, he told me to go faster. Then came the letter. A pale envelope slid through our mail slot, addressed in my father's handwriting. I opened it with zero expectations. Inside was a single line. "I didn't know. I was blind. Forgive me." And a check. A large one. I folded the letter once and placed it in the trash. The check went through the shredder. You don't buy forgiveness. You earn it. And he never tried again. But just when I thought things had reached their end, Denise made one last move. A lawyer's notice. Filed under defamation and emotional distress. Yes, seriously. She was suing me. The brunch, the speech, the fallout. She claimed it cost her sponsorship deals and damaged her personal brand. The same woman who'd allowed a cake to be thrown at me in front of 40 guests now wanted damages. Nate read the notice over my shoulder. Do we crush her? No, I said. We bury her. With facts. What followed was cold.
Clean.
Surgical. We sent counterfilings. Attached receipts.
Dates.
Health bills. Video footage. Sworn testimony from guests. A digital trail of every favor, payment, and gift I had ever given her, including her luxury birthday trip 3 years ago. When her lawyers saw the file we compiled, they withdrew the case. Quietly. Publicly, Denise posted one last time. A photo of flowers. No caption. The comments were locked. And just like that, she disappeared. 1 year later, the brunch hall was booked again. Same venue. Same chandeliers. Different occasion. But this time, it wasn't for Denise's birthday. It was a Women in Business gala hosted by me. I stood near the stage in a sleek black jumpsuit, hair pinned back, no traces of cake or shame. Only composure and quiet power. The room was full. Not with people who secretly hated me, but women who believed in what I was building. Nate was there too, leaning against the wall near the bar, arms folded, pride shining in his eyes like sunlight through glass. He didn't need to say a word. He never did. Not when it came to me. Are you nervous? My assistant, Jess, whispered as the lights dimmed. No, I replied. Not this time. I took the mic with steady hands and faced the audience. My voice didn't tremble. Some of you might know me because of a viral video. It wasn't planned. It wasn't strategic. But it was real. And I think that's what resonated. A few quiet nods. People love watching women fall apart, I continued. They just don't expect us to rise from it with receipts, dignity, and spreadsheets that bite back. Laughter rippled through the room. But here's what no one filmed, I said, voice softening. The part where I stopped asking permission. The part where I stopped explaining why I belonged. I took a breath. The part where I became my own family. The room erupted into applause. I stepped off the stage to the sound of clapping, not mockery. And in the crowd, I saw something I never expected. My father. Not up front. Not dressed for attention. Just standing quietly near the back, holding his hands together and looking like he was carrying 20 years of silence on his shoulders. Our eyes met. He didn't wave.
He didn't speak.
But he nodded.
Once.
It wasn't enough to heal the past, but it was enough to let it go. After the gala, Nate and I walked outside into the cool night. I leaned against the car, eyes lifted toward the stars, my chest light for the first time in years. You know, Nate said, if someone told me a year ago you'd be here, on a stage, running a company, leaving half the brunch crowd stunned silent, I'd have believed them. I smiled, leaning into him. You always did. He kissed my forehead. Now what? Now, I said, I go home, take off my shoes, and decide what color to paint the office we're opening next month. He grinned. What about the family? I shrugged. Let them watch. Let them learn. Let them wonder how I did it without becoming like them. As we drove off, I looked back one last time, not at the people I left behind, but at the version of me who once thought she needed their approval to matter.
She was gone now.
And in her place stood a woman who was no one's step anything.